I'm Steve Forbes, and you're watching Traders Nation.
Welcome back. You are tuned in to Traders Nation. My pleasure to have back with us once again Brad Williams. He's president of Brad Williams Financial Services. Brad, welcome back to Traders Nation. How are you today?
Well, it's great to be back. I'm doing great.
Good. Well, from what I gather, Brad, workers are seeing the biggest pay and benefit increase in 10 years, Brad. What ushered this prosperity in?
Well, I think we're in as far as from Washington's standpoint, we're in a much more friendly business environment.
Sure.
We've actually got a businessman running the country now,
yeah.
And in spite of what people might think of him, he does things like business should. Sure. From an economic sense.
Sure.
And so as we watched over the last 8 years, businesses didn't know what was coming next. You had Obamacare, you had tax increases, you know, regulatory increases, which really are hidden taxes. And all those seem to be whittling down and creating an environment where businesses are going to start spending that cash they've been hoarding in growing their business. And of course, the wages have to rise, because if the job market's rising like it is, they're going to have to hold on to the good people.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that you say that, because you're absolutely right. Small businesses and even large businesses, Brad, they had no idea if they were going to be blindsided with, like you said, a regulation, which is a taxation, laws. It wasn't really a business-friendly environment, and that's probably why we saw so much cash going offshore and being sheltered, because they didn't want the long arm of a Democratic government coming in and hitting them with that. So they had no idea. They couldn't plan, could they, Brad?
No, they couldn't. And, I've often said that money or capital goes where it's most appreciated. Well, when it's appreciated more somewhere else, it goes there, and it flows. It's just like interest rates. The higher the rate, the more money you'll get.
Sure.
And so that's the way, Washington looked at the businesses for too long as a cash cow to fund whatever whim they had. And now we got a guy who understands that the greater good of America is if everybody's got a job and they're keeping pace with inflation and having a higher standard of living.
Right. So nearly $1 trillion has been repatriated back into the United States. We're seeing prosperity coming in growth with small businesses. We're seeing small businesses pop up. We're seeing businesses looking to expand their business and hiring people on. So I think it's working. Whatever D.C. is doing now, or whatever this administration's doing now, it's working without a doubt, coming back in. And this is what I like next is private workers are fared better than the public sector workers. So that's huge, isn't it? And we got private workers now are doing better than the government workers, because the last administration almost seemed like it was a government-run economy versus a consumer economy. But let's talk about this. Total compensation in the private industry rose 2.9%, while government workers saw a 2.3% increase. So we're seeing it on the private side much better. I'm liking that, Brad. Your thoughts?
I agree with you. You got to have a certain amount of government workers, because there are certain things government should do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they get too much involved in things they shouldn't do,
right,
and that siphons money off. The issue that we got going forward as we see not taxes, but interest rates slowly rise to get back where they really should be.
Yeah.
The cost of government's going to increase, and that's going to crowd out some private bars. So that's going to be the real thing to watch, is to make sure that interest rates only slowly go up to allow it to compensate.
Right. And I think they're going to want to do that to hedge off inflation too, because inflation's coming through the pipe. But we'll see if that works for them. And let's face it, the feds need these tools. They've gotten themselves down to zero, which emptied their toolbox out, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, they really did. I mean, who wants to get into a negative rate? I don't want to see it. Wages alone gained 2.8% over the last 12 months, which also reflected a 10-year high. Is this going to help fuel the fires of a consumer economy in our future? I sure hope so. What are your thoughts?
Well, as people have more disposable income, they dispose of it. Yeah. And so, but I think maybe what we might see, which would be good, is that as we've been through the things we've been through the last 10 years, people are paying off debt.
Yeah.
You know, we want to see that. We want to see savings more. And the savings isn't going to increase. And what I mean by that is not necessarily investment in the stock market, but, you know, in banks and CDs and things like that, that banks need that kind of capital to be able to lend. And a strong savings base is required for an economy like ours. And they've been penalizing the savers and rewarding the risk takers. And we're going to see that change.
Right. So let's talk about that briefly, because certainly savings is not America's strong point. We have a real terrible time with savings. Some folks do investing okay for the long term, but savings in the banks, it doesn't pay enough, Brad. Where's the incentive going to come for folks to save a little bit more from the banks and the banking industry?
Well, it'll come as interest rates rise and they start seeing that change. Now, I'm already starting to see things like, you know, a little better money market accounts and CDs that have adjustable rates. You know, if they have a rate increase, you get to renegotiate once. So banks are becoming more friendly. It's, you know, the beauty of a capitalist free, or we're not free, but we're relatively free market, is that businesses are allowed to respond as the market requires. And that's why the government should stay out, because they artificially, you know, create winners and losers when it just needs to happen.
Sure. Do you see this administration kind of getting out of the way of business? Certainly we're seeing regulations being slashed all over the place. Regulations that shouldn't have probably have been in place, and certainly overlapping in many, many areas. Do you see this administration getting out of the way of our economy and also of business?
I really do, and as I look at regulations, which is something I keep track of, there are so many things happening from a regulatory state. I mean, our Congress has basically allowed the regulatory state to dictate the rules.
Sure.
And so they've just grabbed the ball and run with it. Well, Trump's saying, you know, let's give it back to the public. And so they're cutting the regulations. They're cutting some of these bureaus and administrations. And that, you know, we need a much smaller government. We don't need the government we have. We need one that operates efficiently in what it needs to be doing and not what it wants to be doing in.
Yeah. Hey, listen, the Commerce Department said the price index for personal consumption expenditures rose 2.2% year over year in June. Back to the question of inflation, it's on the rise. Where are we seeing most of the inflation coming into our economy? Is it in gas, things like that? Goods?
Well, actually, you know, gas is still kind of flat in my area.
Yeah.
But we don't have a lot of the regulations and the weird formulas and all that in Alabama that some of the other states do.
Sure.
But you know, consumer food prices are increasing.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, some of the goods that are under tariffs, you know, are going to increase, and I think that's going to be the big question, is how this tariff game plays out. And I think some people miss what the president's attitude is about that. He doesn't want tariffs,
right.
But what he needs to do is go to the table from a strong position, and they have to know that he means business. Yeah. And the problem is so many times we've done trade negotiations, I think our trading partners realize that the guy sitting across the table from them, his most important thing is coming home with any deal, much less a good deal.
Right.
And so they play that.
Yeah. So let's briefly, because we're almost out of time, but in the sense of tariffs, don't people get it? This is his negotiating posture when it comes to tariffs and trying to really get the best deal for America. We're trying to get that back in instead of spreading that wealth out to the world. We're trying to bring it back to the U.S., right?
Yes, and you know, a guy like him, you don't make money in the market he was in New York.
Yeah.
Without being a hard negotiator.
Sure.
And he understands that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he comes up, you know, he'll ask for 20 when he really needs 10.
That's right. Brad,
and then you just start from there.
That's right. Where can we find you at, Brad? You got a website?
Yes, askbradwilliams.com.
Askbradwilliams.com. Head on over there today, folks. Hey, Brad, thanks for your time here today. We certainly appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for having me again.
You
Always
bet.
Enjoyable.
My pleasure. Brad Williams, askbradwilliams.com. We'll be right back.